Good morning, everyone. Once again, Tammy and I are out exploring. At the moment, we are on Highway 77, climbing out of LaGrange, Texas, through their curly Q uphill. Okay, we are en route today to Corpus Christi, and we're going to visit again the USS Lexington, an Essex-class Navy aircraft carrier. We've been there before a couple of times, but I wanted to go down and visit the Lex again.
Let me see if they got that A7 finished. They were refurbishing.
Yes, they were restoring an A7, which is the airplanes that I used to work on, and they were in the process of restoring it.
That was 2 years ago we were there.
And they have some other famous airplanes aboard, so come along with us as we take a day trip to Corpus Christi and the USS Lexington. It's going to take us about 2.5 hours to get there. But it's supposed to be a really nice day. It'll be a nice day for a drive, and so...
Yeah, because currently it's 42 degrees out.
Yeah.
In April.
In April, 42 degrees, but it's supposed to be sunny.
It's supposed to get up to 80 this afternoon.
And down in Corpus, it'll be warmer than up here, so I suspect it'll be warmer down there, so... Come along with us as we go out and explore. Coming into Corpus Christi. We're not too far from our destination, so we got to go across this big bridge up here. Looks like it's got 2 sails on it, don't it, Tammy? Been a pretty good trip down. Not that much traffic. And you'll see the Corpus Christi skyline here in a minute. is. They're not.
There's no traffic on
They're
it.
still working on the bridge.
Gosh, they've been working on that for a long
The
time.
lighthouse coming up on the right. Hope we can find a good parking place for Bertha.
Use the right lane to take the exit toward North Beach and Beach Avenue. Take the exit.
We're liable to have to navigate here for a minute, so we're going to cut you off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've made it. And there's the Lexington. Pretty quiet, isn't it, Tim? Here's the bay. We're back at the sea, Tammy. Well, normally we're in Galveston, but painted like the Blue Angels. Still a lot of construction going on around here with the big bridge they're building. An anchor. I had forgotten a lot of the things we're going to see here is from the USS Oriskany. I mentioned the Oriskany just a minute ago. The USS Oriskany was a commissioned ship when I was in the Navy. I served from 1975 through 1981. And the Oriskany was still a commissioned ship then. Had about 2 years, about somewhere around 76, 77, something like that. The Oriskany was sunk, I think, off of Florida as an artificial reef. And some of the parts that was on the Oriskany, they removed and brought here to the Lexington. So come along with us as we board the USS Lexington CV-16. This crane that you see here, I believe there'll be a sign up here, and that crane came off of the Oriskany. Now the Lexington is an Essex class carrier. Think Essex class, think of the Korean War, vintage. Yeah, you can see the info panels there. The Oriskany was the last Essex class carrier. It was pretty old. Yeah, she was sunk off the coast of Florida. Now the carrier that my squadron served aboard was the Constellation CV-64. And it, along with the Ranger and the Coral Sea, and those were the first of the super carriers to be built in the mid to late 1950s. 56, 57, 58, in that time frame. Now up there you can see the famous catwalks that go along the deck up there on the flight deck. You can walk along the side just below the flight deck. Here's an example of a lot of the ladders going up from different levels and up out through that hatch. Now, when I was a young guy, I didn't have a problem with these ladders. You get a little age and you can't get up through these ladders as well as you used to. You can see inside this enclosure they're restoring an F4 Phantom. You can see they got a lot of the skin off. You can see a guy up there working on it. Last we were here, they were doing an A7. You can see the nose of it, where the intake is. There's some really damage on that metal there. They take a beating setting out here in the salt air. Of course, they're not restoring to flight worthiness. They're just restoring it to make it look good so it can go on display. But, and I'm sure it's stripped. There's nothing inside the airplane. All the avionics has been removed. I imagine the engines have been removed. This is the restoration. One thing I ought to explain to you. You see these yellow and red lines here? They go all the way over there. Well, these are big doors that will close to close off parts of the hangar from each other. Like if you have a fire, those kind of things, these big doors will close and separate one side of the hangar deck from another. That's what these lines are for. I'll catch up to you in just a minute. Well, Woody, my good friend Dwayne Wood, we call him Woody. Well, Woody, I'm back aboard a carrier. the Lexington. Man, I'm telling you, brother, it brings back a lot of memories. And I'm sure it would for you too, but boy, oh boy. Can you imagine? It's been 50 years ago since we were aboard the Constellation with our squadron. Seems like it's just was not too long ago, but it's been 50 years. But a big hello to Woody and Stephanie, good friends of ours. Taking a shot of the hangar down towards the bow. And normally when a carrier is at sea, this hangar is full of airplanes, and they're parked so close together that they almost touch. And so you meander your way through all of the airplanes that are parked here in the hangar. They're either getting worked on or they're down here stored or whatever, but as far down as you can see, they've got it glassed off down near the bow. But normally airplanes would be parked nose to tail, and you can even see that in some movies where you can see how all the airplanes are parked on the hangar. The flight deck is about 3 decks above us. And you can see how the overhead myriad of pipes and wires and all that kind of stuff. And here's looking aft towards the fantail. So all of this would have airplanes parked. But we're going to go out here. I got one of the doors open so you can go out here and look over the side. A big Pelican. You can look out into the bay. Of course, you can imagine that a big Navy ship sitting here in salt water, I mean, it takes a toll on them. And you got to consider how old the Lexington is. And so you see a lot of places where you can see rust really taking a hold. And it's just a Herculean task to keep them in a somewhat good condition. Now, that's what happened to the Texas. She sat so long that her keel started leaking. That's why they had to put her in dry dock to fix the keel. I mean, otherwise it'd just sink. But these ships are old. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of volunteers to keep them up. And you can see the damage, the time and sea and salt air takes on them. Yeah, we're good to the hangar. Well, I don't know. We're a good ways up still. You can see the hull down there. It's pretty rusty. But, of course, it can never move again. Well, I should say, it can move as long as tugboats move it. Oh, there's a barge going out right over there. And it looks like some ships are coming in way out there. Okay, here's one of them slang terms. Also, scuttlebutt is rumors. The latest rumor. But these are just drinking fountains. Okay, Tammy and I are going to go up to the flight deck. And to do that, we got to climb these stairs. So, I know, but can you get up these stairs? Okay. You want to go first?
No.
Okay. You want? Nope.
No.
I was thinking that they had an elevator, but I'm not sure where it's at. But anyway, we gotta just watch your head.
Which way are we going?
We gotta go around. It even smells like a Navy ship. Oh, I smell that. And I think, oh my gosh. I remember that smell. To think that I used to run up and down these stairs. We'll find the elevator and take the elevator down. You making it?
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna go up another one. Ready? Going down is a lot easier than going up, but okay. We're up here to the flight deck. Okay. There's a Coast Guard ship over there, Tammy. Here's a tomcat sitting on the catapult up here. I'm walking up to the bow of the ship. And you really can't get a good idea just how big these carriers are until you come aboard one of them. But I wanted to show you the Coast Guard ship that's coming in. To the inner bay. See where it's going. And I believe that's the aquarium over there. So, Coast Guard cutter. Walking in the plank. Now normally this is as far as you could walk on up to the bow of a carrier. And these angle pieces was part of the catapulting system. And they have a net thing here so that we can walk actually down here on it. Now, usually you can't do this. And of course you can see the nets over the side in case somebody was to fall over. Hopefully the net would catch them, but not always. And so you can come all the way down here and you can see the very bow of the ship. And normally, like on my carrier, they didn't have portholes like that. you can see the other one that's stuck out like that. But you can see the very bow of the ship down there. You know, like I said, normally on a carrier you can't do this, but they've got it set up to where people can walk out here. And this will be the end of the catapult. Now you can see the Tomcat sitting down there, and it would be the start of the catapult. So that airplane has got the distance from where you see it to the end of this bow to get off. Otherwise it just falls into the ocean. There you can see the island. And normally on a newer carrier, they didn't have guns on them, didn't have cannons on them. They had rocket systems, and they had the rest of the fleet to protect them. So the later carriers like mine never had any guns. But you can see the main island there, and you can see Mom sitting there. Now there's two catapults on the bow. There would be one over here, and of course the Tomcat sitting on the other one. And they would launch these airplanes off the catapults. Not exactly the same time, but they would stagger them by a few seconds. And then there would be two catapults coming off the angle deck over there. And so if you were launching off of the bow, you could catch on the fantail. You could trap an airplane coming in. So two could shoot off and one could trap coming in. Of course, you have to recycle and move the airplanes around, but and a lot of times airplanes would be angle parked here on the bow, and while they're catching airplanes coming in. And sometimes if the airplane, when it trapped, if it got too close to the airplanes that were parked here in the angle, they could clip a tail of one of the parked airplanes, and that did happen on my carrier. But behind these airplanes, whenever they were sitting on the catapult, when they turned up to full power, especially the Tomcat, it had afterburners. There'd be deflectors that came up behind the airplane, which would redirect the exhaust straight up and away from the crew. Back in the day, this would have been a steam catapult, but they've removed the catapults and they just asphalted over them and painted that red line down the deck to simulate it. But it was a raised portion coming up above the deck that had a shuttle, and the launch bar from the airplane will hook into the shuttle. But like I say, they've removed the catapults. And you can see the Tomcat close up. And just think about it, all these airplanes are turning up, right? They're sucking in all this air and blowing out all the exhaust. You get too close to this exhaust, and man, they will suck you right up in a heartbeat. And here's an info panel on the Tomcat. Now this was the premier fighter in my day, on my carrier. We had the F-14s, the A-6s, the A-7s, RF-8 Crusaders, the A-3, of course the Hueys, E-2 Hawkeyes, and I probably forgot one, but and we're, like I said, we're talking back in 76, 77. So of course all those airplanes are now gone a long time ago. Like I said, you can't see them now because they've removed them, but there would be a big blast door right in here that would swing up and redirect the exhaust from the engines up so it wouldn't hit the airplane behind it or the crew. And the Tomcat, when they launched, they were in full afterburners. So you got big flames coming out the back of this airplane, right? And at night, it would just light up the deck when they went into afterburner. But they would have a deflector door back here. Now, all these old carriers, they had wooden decks. And you can see part of the original deck right here. Of course, it's in very bad shape. But the idea was, like in World War II, if a bomb had damaged the deck, it's easier to fix it with planks than it would be if it was an all-metal deck. So the later carriers, the super carriers, like the one I was on, they were all metal decks, right? And really, you had to do that too because of the more modern airplanes with the afterburners. You didn't want to catch the deck on fire, especially the Harrier when its exhaust went straight down. So these old carriers had wooden decks, and a lot of them just got asphalted over. So there's a part of the original wooden deck. Of course, here's the island. And up there would be the flight deck control. And over here on this end would be part of, the captain. They were actually running the ship, right? Maneuvering it. But back here is where flight operations were. And up there would be a TV camera. We called it the Plat. It took video of all the airplanes landing and such. But the island is a little different than what it was on my carrier, but considering the age of this, there's a lot of difference. And one thing you notice is that we're standing right in the middle of the landing zone. You can see the outside white line there and over there. And this is the middle of the landing zone. So airplanes would be coming directly at us, landing and catching the wire. Now, if I come around to this is the angle deck going off to the side. And if down there where you saw the hangar, they would have to stop before they got to that area. Now, it's a little bit different here on the Lexington because the angle deck has been added later since the ship was actually built. And this is what a cockpit of the A7E looked like. Notice all your engine instruments are down here on the left. There's your throttle. Landing gear handle is up here. Over there is the tail hook handle. And that's the canopy release, and in all these boxes that you see, it does certain functions. But I used to start these up and run them maintenance turns. But this is what the cockpit of an A7E looks like. And notice up here, all these push buttons here, as well as over there. Up here would be the HUD. Yep, this is an A7E. Spent many hours in the cockpit of these airplanes, turning them up for maintenance turns and working on them. And of course, there's the ejection seat. And that's pretty hard to sit in too. I mean, it wasn't that comfortable. Brings back a lot of memories. Now here's an A7. Now this happens to be a B. And I worked on the E model. Same basic design, but different incorporation. The E had a Gatling gun. It had rocket rails on the side of the fuselage. It was a little bit different, but the overall look of the A7 is the same. And like you can see there, the bombs on the pylons, they could be fully loaded, plus rockets on the side of the fuselage. Now the trainer we first saw when we came aboard was what, back in the day, the pilots would have used to help train on it. But and yes, the A7 replaced the A4. It could carry much more bombs. It mentions the F8 Crusader that looks something like the A7. And there you go. The first operational A7 squadron was VA 147. That was my squadron. And it's actually still in operation today. Although I think it's VF 147. It is still based out of Lemoore, California, which was my base when I was in. Not to be confused with the Corsair. That was a prop job that was during World War II that you seen Baba Black Sheep used to fly. Built the Corsair. Now look at the size of that intake. That thing was a gigantic vacuum cleaner when the engine was running. And before I used to start up these engines, I had to crawl in that intake all the way down to the engine, about mid-airplane, inspect all the turbo blades and the seals and all that kind of stuff, and then crawl back out. I would never let them hook up the huffer until I got out of the intake. And the huffer is what they used to hook up to start them. I was always afraid somebody would throw a switch and they'd try to start the damn thing while I was in there, but I'd never let them do that. The A7E had a big Gatling gun down under here, where you can see that this had guns on the side. But they've done a good repaint and fix on it. Not restoration, but and of course the red shirts, the EOD guys, the ordnance would load all the bombs on there. 1,000 pounders, 500 pounders, rock eye, all kinds of stuff they could hang on this thing, and it could carry nuclear weapons. What you see there is the arresting cable. This is one of the arresting mechanisms. And normally, this would be stretched straight across the deck. And so you can see just how big that cable is. Right, here's my hand around it. And as the airplane came in and grabbed a hold of this cable, that's the only thing that would stop the airplane, right? And so when the airplane grabbed it, it would come ripping out of this assembly over here to stop the airplane. And then when the airplane would unhook from it, then these rollers, these mechanisms, would then roll the cable back up inside of here and stretch the cable tight across the deck again for the next airplane to come in. And you can see them down there, the next two in line. So there was 4 of them. Now back in my day, the goal was to catch the number 3 wire. And so the airplane had 4 chances to catch a wire, and normally it would be the number 3. But let me tell you what, when the airplane caught that cable, you didn't want to be anywhere near it when it come ripping out of these mechanisms. And I actually have seen this cable break when the airplane grabbed it, pulled it out, and one end of it broke. And so the cable just was like a whip going around the deck. Anything about knee high got cut in half. But anyway, this is the A7. And down underneath there, which you can't see, is the tail hook, which catches this cable. Now here on this F2, you can see a tail hook. And that's what it looks like. You see it looks like a cow's hoof, right? And it's got this groove cut into it, and the cable would lay in this groove. Well, that was the goal anyway. And this sucker is heavy, I'm telling you. A lot of times when the airplane would come in, the heel of this tail hook would bounce on the deck, and it would throw sparks whenever it hit the deck. But that's the only thing that would catch that cable I was just showing you. And the cable was under tension, so based upon how weight or how heavy the airplane was, is how they set it up, so that it would catch the airplane without it pulling all the cable out going over the side of the deck, which that also happened on my carrier. The airplane pulls it out too far, and the nose gear of the airplane went over the angle. You can see another tail hook there on the F9F. Now here you can see a launch bar on the A7. It was hydraulically worked, and so they would apply hydraulic pressure from that piston right there, and the launch bar would go down, and the shoe of the shuttle would hook around this launch bar. They take up tension on it, and that's the only thing that was connected between the airplane and the deck when this airplane was launched off a carrier. And so that's the launch bar mechanism. And up here would be the approach lights, which is in pretty bad shape. But it would be green, amber, and red. And those lights would shine here onto the carrier so they could see if the airplane was coming in too fast, too slow, and whatever. If those lights were flashing, the approach lights, that would tell them that the tail hook was not down. So they had to be on steady. And you can see that sometimes in the movies where you'll see the green light, which was in the middle, and then the red and yellow. And sometimes you can see that on the movies. Now here's the stuff we used to fight fires with on board a carrier. Everybody had to learn firefighting on board a carrier. It was called AFFF. Aqueous film forming foam is what it was. Now I think it causes cancer, but this is what we used to use to fight fires on board a carrier.
Welcome to the Women of the Navy exhibit.
The one thing I can say about this AFFF was it stinks.
Our hope is for their legacy to inspire future generations. Welcome and join.
When I was non-rated, I was sent one time to the Spud Locker. And that's what this is here. You can see that giant potato peeler over there. It was my famous story where one time we got a menu and it said we had to peel 10,000 pounds of potatoes. So here we were with peelers peeling 10,000 pounds of potatoes. And one of the chiefs came in and he says, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, "Well, we're peeling potatoes." And he said, "They got a machine for that." And then they showed us how to use the machine. And down there is the port side propeller shaft down in there. But you can't go down in there, but you can see the big chain around there. But that's the port side propeller shaft. I'm down in the engine room. There's number 3 turbine. See the main steam. You can imagine how noisy it was down here. Here's the engine spaces diagram. I'm gonna walk over here. Low pressure turbine. Reduction gears. Where was something? Look at all the cables over there. Well, you really had to know your stuff down here. And hope that all the guys above you up on the flight deck and everywhere else knew what they were doing. That is a mass of cables. Walk back over the bridge here. And then down. These are all the deck plates. You can see inside one of the turbines. Boy, it's something down here. There's number 3 turbine, the front. You wouldn't want to be in here if they set off the halon system. It's the Constellation I was on, was an oil-fired carrier, but all of the carriers today are nuclear-powered. Man, I'm telling you, all kinds of gauges. Some of the calibration dates is 90, 81, 91. Lube oil temperature. Gee, money. £150 steam. It was like a vacuum. Main condenser vacuum. Balancing valve. Your stern throttle. A head throttle. A telegram. Engine order telegram. There's indicators. And that's cool. You certainly had to know what you were doing. And of course, these guys are down here in the engine room trying to keep the ship running with everything going up, topside. Bombs coming down and another mass of cables. Look at that. This just goes to show you it takes everybody doing their job on board a Navy ship. I don't care if you're the guy down in the bowels of the ship running the engines, or you're the barber, or you're the mess cook, or the dentist, or the aviators up on the flight deck, maintenance guys, everybody has got to do their job to keep one of these ships moving. You see on these hatch, the dogs. These things here, the dog that hatched down the knee. You see how they would rotate, and this was dog in the hatch. Well, they've got a padlock, and some of them are missing, but that's what's called dog in the hatch. You pulled this around and locked it in place. You see how far that passageway goes down through there? Can you imagine running through these passageways, jumping over those knee knockers down through there, trying to get to your general quarter station? And that's why they're called knee knockers. There's a cranial helmet. He actually had one of them on. It was green, but you had it on. These are all the colors of the jerseys I was telling you about. Here's the original Lexington CV2.
When a cruise at battle station or general quarters, it can be long and scary. Some good food can help, and Navy cooks know it.
When the men were in general quarters, they couldn't keep their appointed times with the meetings. So sometimes someone went down for their food, other times as cooks at the
That was my ship. That was the Connie. She no longer exists. She was cut up into pieces a long time ago. I actually have that patch. And I have a hat like that. Later, she was just called the CV-64. And it's so dark, you probably can't see it, but the ship's coins. Kind of behind some of the display here, so you can't really get a good commissioned 27th of October 1961. Here is a display of the Coral Sea. CV-43. And the Independence.
Well, that's it, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your visit on board Lexington. Have a wonderful Lexington day. That's all.
USS Forstall. And 59.
USS Lexington's CV-16's Carrier Road exhibit, dedicated to Captain Rocco Montesano, Executive Director on board Lexington for 20 years. This exhibit showcases only the large carriers. The CVs and the CVLs have their own exhibits on the directors and the crew of the USS Lexington.
The Independence, the Enterprise, and the Ranger.
Aircraft carrier-related trips.
Okay, here is a good display of the carriers from CV1 to Langley. You can see all of them down through the years. Okay, we're going to start with CV18, the Wasp of this panel, down through the years. There's the Oriskany, CV34, 1979. And there's the Coral Sea, 43. Here's the continuation of it. These are the carriers that were running around when I was in the Navy. The Ranger, the Independence, the Kitty Hawk, and the Constellation. Colony was scrapped in 2015. Here's his continuation. So here's a good progression of United States aircraft carriers. The N stands for nuclear. So here you go. There's the designations before the letters. CV, large carrier, A, attack, N, nuclear, I've never seen this all in one place like this. This is really, really good for the progression. The Nimitz was the first nuclear carrier, and then from then on they were. Well, Tammy and I are leaving the Lexington. We've had a kind of a full day. This is the elevator, by the way, we're standing on. You can see the big cables. A part of the mechanisms that pull the elevator up to the flight deck. But we're down on the hangar level, and there's the island where we were at before. We've had a good day aboard the Lex. We still got a couple hours to drive back to LaGrange. So thank you to the USS Lexington for having us aboard today. It's always a thrill for me to go aboard these Navy ships.